About 10 years ago, I started doing something daily that has literally changed my life. Every morning before I get out of bed, I smile and I say, I'm going to have a great day. There will be challenges, but it's still going to be great. And you know what? It works. Welcome to the show dedicated to helping you not just survive retirement, but to have the confidence to lean in and rock it because you're focused on the right things. Seriously, man, it works. Today on the show, we are going to focus on the non-financial realm as we continue this focus on process and distinguishing between the things we can control and the things we can't control. I'm going to go through the 4 non-financial pillars that we focus on. In addition to that, we're going to have a legend in the behavioral finance space, Dr. Meir Statman, author of A Wealth of Wellbeing. This is a guy that you should listen to if you want to rock retirement. He's going to share his thoughts on what they've identified as the things that help people have a great life. Now, last week we didn't get to any of your questions, so we're going to answer some of your questions today as well. We'll answer one on using the 72T strategy. That's the substantially equal periodic payments technique for getting money out of IRAs prior to 59 and a half. I'm actually going to, in addition to answering the question today, I'm going to share a video walking through the basics so you understand the concept in the case that it might be applicable to you. We'll share that video in our weekly Noodle email. You can sign up for the Noodle email, which is a recap of the show, as well as links to special resources. You can sign up for that at thenoodle.me. So that's what we're going to do today. Just a forecast. We're going to have another legend on next week when we focus on investing. And we're going to have Charles Ellis, author of Winning the Loser's Game. Man, he is amazing. And that book is pivotal in my investment career. So I'm excited for that as well. All right, so let's get going by talking about somebody that is rocking retirement in the wild. One thing that's nice about sending out the Noodle on a weekly basis is that when someone hits reply, it goes directly to me. Now, we get a lot of questions and we log those questions to try to answer on the show, but every now and then I get constructive feedback, sometimes nice, sometimes not, but that's okay. But I also get you and people like you sharing their journey to creating a great retirement, which is always awesome. So I want to share one. I'm going to share it anonymously, and I'm just going to read what they wrote. I wanted to sincerely thank you for your sharing your expertise with us non-experts. My husband just announced his retirement last week, and thanks to your processes, we no longer fear our ability to fund the rest of our lives. We have at least 5 years of stable funds, and honestly, neither of us have checked our investments yet, even with these volatile markets this year. We know we'll soon need to look, but we're confident that this money we don't plan on touching for at least 5 years. I'm so glad my husband discovered your podcast a few years ago when we were just beginning to think about this stage in life. I know that sometimes people can be quick to criticize, so I want to make sure you hear how truly grateful we are. That is what this is all about. It's about you having confidence to make decisions and confidence that you can navigate as all the craziness of the world and life unfolds. And we're always going to focus on that. Congratulations on his retirement. I don't know if you're retired or not, but I hope you have a wonderful journey. I'm sure it will be. All right, well, let's move on to talking about the controllables and uncontrollables in the non-financial realm. So at this point in time, you've likely been working, saving, and investing for decades and building a life along the way. If you're approaching retirement or newly in retirement, it's very easy and logical to focus on the financial aspects of funding your life when you don't have a paycheck. This is pretty important because you don't have a paycheck and you need to be able to fund your life. What can happen, though, is we can overemphasize the financial end of things and focus on markets and the economy and outlook, and not focus on the things that really are drivers of creating a great life or rocking retirement. Money is important. Don't get me wrong. It's a serious business, retirement planning from a money aspect of it. But over the years, and this is 35 years in my case, of working with people moving into retirement, rarely do I equate having money with people that I see that are the happiest and the most fulfilled in retirement. It definitely helps, but I've seen very miserable people that have tens of millions of dollars or even $5 to $10 million. And I've seen extremely happy, fulfilled people with much more modest means. I think Wes Moss, who wrote the book, What the Happiest Retirees Know, did a lot of research on what makes somebody happy in retirement. And his research said it's around 500 to 800,000 net worth is sort of the number. I don't know how that number came up, how he came up with that number. But the point is, money is important to fuel life, but it's not as important as we think. And oftentimes in retirement planning, we're so focused on the money that we forget to focus on the rest of our lives. So within the financial realm, we're going to talk with Meir Statman in a moment. Let's identify some things that are controllable and not controllable that we have to manage within the 4 pillars of the non-financial life in retirement. So pillar number 1 is mindset. I have observed that the healthiest people, the most satisfied people in retirement, have an optimistic can-do mindset in retirement. Now, there's a lot of things that can derail our mindset. I had a really bad day yesterday. I got derailed and was not my best self. What are the things that aren't controllable when it comes to mindset? Well, one thing that's not controllable is what others do or expect or want from us. We can't control that. Another thing that we can't control is how the world is. We can't control outcomes. We can control our actions, but the outcomes are independent of that. That's something that I learned in Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke, a great book. So there's a lot of stuff that are out there in the world that we can't control. What can we control? Well, one of the things that we can control is how we talk to ourselves. That's an interesting one to think about. We generally are much kinder to everyone else than we are to ourselves. We're our own harshest critic in our head, but we can control that narrative. We can control accepting the things that we can't control so we have more peace. We can control how we judge how things happen and how we react to those. We can control beginning the day with a smile, acknowledging that things won't go all of our way, but affirming that we're still going to have a great day. We can control what happens when challenges pop up. We can ask questions like, what does this make possible? My car broke down. What does this make possible? Or when we're dealing with a difficult situation, ask ourselves, do we want to pour gasoline on this situation by our reaction? Or do we want to pour water on it? We can ask the question, okay, this just happened. Yeah, it sort of sucks, but what do I do now? These are things within the mindset category that we can actually control and that we should foster good habits with. What about energy? Energy is an important one. That's the second non-financial pillar. And that's essentially, we have to be a participant in having the energy to show up for our life. And there's a lot of things we can't control here, right? We can't control aging. We're going to get older. We're going to get stiffer. We're going to get less flexible. We can't control accidents. Can't control genetics. We can't control when cancer or another disease pops up. We can't control the healthcare system. And it's easy to get frustrated about those things and feel like we're a victim of those things. But there are things where we can have some control and agency. We can control our healthy habits, right? We can floss. We can eat healthy. We can have good sleep rituals to try to improve our sleep, even if it's imperfect. We can exercise, which is cardio, strength, stretching. We can control doing breathing exercises. And even in the healthcare domain of interacting with our doctors, even though we can't control the system, we can make sure we're having regular checkups and following the protocols to try to identify things early. We can engage with our healthcare professionals, as imperfect as the system might be, to be proactive and be an advocate for ourselves and push our doctors and nurses to be advocates for us when sometimes they're overwhelmed. So we do have areas where we can control. Now, the third pillar in the non-financial realm that we need to take action on is our passions. Work usually fills a lot of this. These are, essentially happy people have projects. What are we passionate about? Now, what can't we control in this realm? Well, I've seen we can't control our capabilities in some ways due to wear and tear on the body and aging. We could have sports or interests like basketball or running or something like that we're very passionate about, but because of injuries or wear and tear are not healthy things to do anymore. And we can't control that. We can't control the loss of our titles of VP of, marketing or head of a team that you're leading. We can't control the loss of those titles as we transition or the labels and how we defined ourselves. We can't control those things. But what can we control under our passions, the things that we pursue? Well, we can cultivate curiosity, cultivate creativity. We can continually try things to find a purpose. We can work to serve others, to discover new activities that we can do. If you can't run, maybe you can become a passionate cyclist. If you led a team that really brought you joy and you retired, well, maybe you can volunteer or mentor to lead teams. There are things we can find and control here to find interests and pursuits and passions to fulfill our life, because we're always going to want to have goals and to achieve something. And the last pillar, which is probably the most important, at least in a lot of happiness studies, is our relationships. Most people's lives are a direct reflection of their peer groups. You are like the people you hang out with. Now, what is uncontrollable here? Well, what's uncontrollable are those natural endings of things. We have people that move away and move out of our lives. We have people that pass away. We have change when we leave careers and we don't interact near as much. We can't control a lot of that. The other thing that we can't control, this is a big one, the foe, family of origin. We have parents and siblings and nieces and nephews and aunts and uncles. We can't control. We didn't select them. We were born into them. And many times those dominate our life. But where do we have control? We could be a victim to that, or we could focus on where do we have control? Well, we can set boundaries. Now, it doesn't mean it's easy. Remember Thomas Sowell's quote, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. We can set boundaries on what we're willing to do for others, who we allow to speak into our lives. We can set those boundaries. We can focus on fostering, building better relationships. And the number one task there, by the way, is not meeting more people. It's becoming worthy of being a friend. If you want to build friendships, you need to cultivate curiosity. You need to be interesting and be creative, because that will be attractive to other people. You need to focus on finding your people. Who is your peer group when you leave work? What kind of people do you want to be around? Do you want to be around people that complain about their health or the country or things? Or do you want to be around people that are trying new things and reading interesting books and involved in conversation? You need to find your people. And then you need to put yourself at risk and kiss a lot of frogs, as they say, right? You have control over that. Okay, we're going to go. We went on a friend date recently with some new friends, people that we met here in town in Colorado, and we had a great dinner. And it looks like, hey, this might be the spark of a friendship. But you can go on other friend dates like that and realize, oh, yeah, we don't have that much in common, even though they're really nice. There is always something you can control in your mindset, in your energy, in your passions and interests, and in your relationships. And that's the key to building a great life, is finding where you have control. So it's always helpful to show some exemplars of this. And we all can probably think of a number of them in the public realm. I just did a few basic research a little bit of basic research just to find a few. Well, one of the OGs of this in the modern world is Viktor Frankl, who was in the Holocaust. He was a survivor. He lost his pregnant wife, parents, and brother in the concentration camps, and then went on to develop a whole psychological approach, Man's Search for Meaning. Wonderful book that has sold millions of copies. He did not let all of that tragedy define him. He found areas where he had control, and that's a wonderful book. You can think of Nelson Mandela, who was imprisoned for 27 years. A lot of reason to feel like a victim and have a lot of hate, but he found control and became a leader. Maya Angelou, after experiencing trauma and sexual abuse as a child that left her mute for nearly 5 years, she transformed her pain into powerful literature, wrote Why the Caged Bird Sings. Another one, and I'm going to mispronounce his last name, Nick Vujicic. Google him and watch a video or two of him. Inspiring guy. He was born without arms and legs due to some rare disorder, and he overcame depression and suicidal thoughts to become a world-renowned motivational speaker. Countless examples that have been written in books. But let's close the aperture to quote-unquote normal people like you and I. And this is where I have found the Rock Retirement Club a source of inspiration for me and for many other members. I mean, just off the top of my head, I can think of Elaine, and I can think of Susan, and I can think of Mark Statman, who has a podcast, Mark's Money Mind, great podcast. All of them widowed right at retirement, married long time, lost their spouses right when they were ready to go on a grand adventure with them. I mean, how sad is that? And each of them, because I know them from the Rock Retirement Club, have created great lives or are in the process of creating great lives. Elaine, I saw the other day, and she's traveling the country in an RV, mountain biking, and she's in her mid-60s. These are just real people like you and I, where life happens. I think of Rick in our club, and this is 7 years ago, was diagnosed with ALS and didn't become victim. He went and traveled the world with his family, and his wife, once Rick passed, who lost Rick, I was able to be part of her journey in the first few years of her reimagining her life, and she's rocking retirement now, and she lost her husband of many years. There are countless examples in the club and in your life of people that have had things happen to them that would give them every right to say, my life is not what it's going, my life isn't going to be great. And I thought it would. But they found a place to find agency to create a great life from that tragedy. That is the work of being human. And we always got to focus on the things that we can control. All right. With that said, let's have a chat with a legend in this area and a wonderful man, Meir Statman. If you're not familiar with Meir, he is the Glenn Klimek Professor of Finance at Santa Clara University. Research focuses on behavioral finance, and he attempts to understand how investors and managers make financial decisions. In his most recent book, and we'll have a link to this in the noodle, A Wealth of Wellbeing, a holistic approach for behavioral finance, moves beyond just simply financial decisions. We'll have a link to his bio. This guy has spent his life working to improve behaviors within the financial realm and now within creating a great life outside of the financial realm. So let's have a wonderful chat with Dr. Statman. I'm here at Dr. Meir Statman. Statman. How are you, sir?
I'm okay. Good to speak with you, Roger.
I'm excited to speak with you. Your book came to me and I got so excited. I was blessed to have Amazon get it to me in a day because I like physical books. Your book, A Wealth of Wellbeing, a holistic approach to behavioral finance. My first question is, what motivated you to write this book as a behavioral finance researcher and professor?
Well, I've always been interested in human behavior. Everyone is.
Yeah.
But I do it professionally in the area of economics and finance. And At the beginning, when I was a student in the late 60s, we talked about rational people just maximizing their wealth. Then I discovered the links to psychology that enabled me to answer questions that were not answered before. Like, why is it that people like dividends, or why is it they are reluctant to realize losses? And we describe people as irrational, and I never really liked that. I think that people are normal, and so we moved from this notion of rational to irrational, and then I think that normal is describing who we are. And I wanted to expand that domain, that circle of finance, to include life, to include life well-being. Because finance is more than about the numbers. Yes, I teach the numbers, but it is really about life. And I try to bring this in, reading a lot by psychologists and sociologists and people in the law and people in politics and so on. And so, as you could see in the book, I combine a lot of literature that is not known by people in finance, a lot of literature about well-being, with stories that bring those usually dry studies to life.
When I think about modern portfolio theory, and one of the assumptions in it is rational players.
Yeah.
And I think that proves, in practice, that's not true, especially individual investors. Irrational does seem like the next place to go, but it's really normal. So this is a way of bringing it off of the spreadsheet in a way in real life. It is normal.
That is right. And there's more to life than figuring out whether you can spend 4% or 3.5% in retirement and all of that. Now, let me say something that might be surprising to you. I knew Harry Markowitz, and we wrote some papers together. And Harry Markowitz, despite the fact that he knew his mathematics and he did his mean variance portfolio theory, he understood people, and he knew that this is not how people actually behave. And so we wrote a paper together about how people, in fact, create their portfolios. And the idea is that people do not treat their portfolios as kind of one blob, but rather there is money for retirement, and there is money for educating the kids, and there is money for leaving for the kids, our community, and so on. And so that really is something that not everyone know about, how broad and thoughtful and wise Harry Markowitz was.
So you sort of get pigeonholed when something takes hold like that, right? Essentially, different pots of money have different time horizons and purposes.
That is right, and he understood it very well. I would sometimes tease him about his being a behavioral kind of scholar, and he would say, "Well, Meir, you walk on your side of the river, and I will walk on mine." He still took pride in mean variance portfolio theory because that is what won him the Nobel Prize. But he did it with a smile, knowing what people really are. He was just a delightful man, and I'm really fortunate to have been his friend and collaborator.
When I think about that, Meir, what I think about is, and I imagine that in your profession, you have to have this. You're just naturally curious and hold things lightly because you're searching all the time. You're not rigid in an opinion versus searching for uncovering truth in different ways.
That is right. Yeah, and I think that if you are a professor, and I make decent money, I'm not complaining at all. In fact, I'm accidentally a wealthy man. But what drew me to academia is really this ability to explore ideas and to expand and to see connections where people don't see them. I'm amazed at many of my colleagues in academic finance who are able to separate their personal lives from their scholarship. And so they behave in ways that you would describe as normal or sometimes funny and absurd. But somehow when they come to their papers, there are those rational people who don't ask themselves, why is it that a supermarket places the bread and the milk in the back and the chewing gum and chocolate in the front?
Well, let's talk about behavioral finance. And my impression of it as a practitioner for 30 plus years. So I have a different, I come from a different perspective, and I think they both are really important, is the framing of the problem of personal finance or financial planning is money. And it came from the industry of money, so that makes sense. And personal or behavioral finance started that way and focusing on why do investors make mistakes or do make certain decisions within the money domain and all the different, endpoint bias and all those types of things. And it always felt like there was so much more to explore beyond simply investor decisions in behavioral finance. And I think that's where you outlined this really well in your book in terms of the generational evolution of that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So, actually, when you read the work of, say, people even in economics or sociology, sometimes they will list finances kind of last, and in fact, if I asked you what is most important in life, you're probably not beginning with money. You're probably going to say family and friends and community and so on. But you need money for all of that. And so it is important not to denigrate financial well-being and not overemphasize it. Now, we moved, as you said, in that first generation, and most people, when they think about behavioral finance, still think about this first generation. And it is about things like overconfidence and regret and so on. How funny people are, that they try to beat the market, that they trade too much, they are reluctant to realize losses, and so on. And I think that is important. It is really important to get people to make smart decisions, rational or not, smart decisions. But again, there is more than that. For one thing, in the first generation, the focus was on kind of the mistakes of stupid people, irrational people. In the second generation that I describe is one where we think about financial products, stocks, bonds, and so on as the equivalents of cars and restaurant meals and so on, that people derive utilitarian benefits, but also expressive and emotional benefits. Just think about choosing a Toyota versus choosing a Lexus,
What it says about yourself and all that.
Yeah. And when I say that to people in marketing, they say, duh, we know that. But somehow for people in finance, it kind of strikes them as being just a bit outside the field. But then beyond that, in that third generation that I describe in this book, it is really to say you need money to have life well-being, but it is life well-being that we seek. And so life well-being is about family, and it is about friends, and it is about work and health and religion and society. And all of those elements matter in determining whether you have the life well-being that you are searching for.
Can I restate that in that it's moving from how do we behaviorally manage ourselves to optimize return and evolving to how do we manage ourselves to optimize well-being, and finance is part of that.
Yeah, we talk about financial well-being, and financial well-being is about managing your saving and spending such that you take care of today and you take care of tomorrow, retirement. How do you sustain yourself in face of shocks, losing a job, for example, and so on. These are all important, but you really have to move from that to life well-being. And life well-being, as I said, includes financial well-being, but it goes beyond that.
And that is like in my domain of retirement planning, which is where my mastery journey lies and curiosity lies, that becomes financial well-being is a part of a bigger whole. And if you, like we all have good examples we could probably come up with of people that are very excellent in their financial well-being, but are very inadequate in their personal capital or their social capital or other areas. So it's really about building a non-flat tire, so to speak, right? So let's go ahead.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. I think that there's a U curve, as you know, in life well-being. So young people well-being tends to go down from early adulthood to middle age. And then it begins to go up. And you ask yourself, why is it that people in their 70s are enjoying higher life well-being than people in their 40s? And the answer is that if you are smart as an older man, what you do is you tamp down your ambition. Ambition is a wonderful thing. If I were not ambitious, I would not go into a PhD program. I would not strive to move from being an assistant professor to associate and full professor and so on. But ambition is frustrating because it means that you're not where you want to be. The nice thing about being in my 70s is that I let things slide, I'm not the wealthiest, I'm not the most successful academic, but I say to myself, you've done very well, Meir, okay, calm down whenever I feel like there's somebody who is outracing me. And so, as I say, knowing the meaning of enough, that is what I know. And the people who have a ton of money and still have low well-being are people who just forget to stop racing. And
it's scary to go to other places that you are atrophied muscle-wise and behavior-wise, right? It's intimidating. Let me ask you a question about the U curve. You say the 70s. When do you have any data, or do you have some intuition of when it starts to move up age-wise?
Well, I think, the studies were not done by me, but the studies show that kind of midlife, think about it as mid-50s. It's beyond the 40s of it is, and that is perhaps, your kids are no longer teenagers. Maybe they've left the house. You have reached kind of a peak in terms of your earning ability and so on. You kind of think now about the rest of your life. And what is happening really is that you begin to give up on that striving ambition for moving up in the management ladder or income and so on. And you say, I've arrived at that. What do I do now with my life? And if you are retired, you know that now you have the time and you don't have the pressures of work. But what you do with that time and what you do with that attention, you can do volunteer work, for example. The money is adequate at this point, but you can really feel good doing good for other people.
This reminds me a little bit of David Brooks' The Second Mountain, of once you achieve the financial peak, you start thinking about this can't be all it, and then you discover the meaning, the community, the service. I've had these internal coaching with myself, Meir, related to this. Of at some point I was trying to tease out, why am I'm always discontent? I'm 58. And I'm like, is this just my natural state? Am I ever going to be content? And I think that's a little bit of what you're discussing.
Yes, I have very good news for you. You are now at the beginning of the upswing. You are at the bottom now.
Yes.
But you are going up. And that really involves kind of changing perspective, really saying, I am where I should be. I have accomplished what I can accomplish financially, professionally, and now it is a matter of finding things that are of interest, things that are fulfilling, things that enhance my life well-being.
And they don't necessarily need to be separate, I would imagine.
Oh no. Yeah. I think that, I still teach full-time. I hold a full-time position, and I get paid. And I care whether I get a small raise in salary or a large one. And, these still are important to me, but they're not as important as they were in the past. I'm not really driven as I was in the past to really earn enough to be able to support myself and my family now and in the future. I don't teach in the summer where I did when I was a young man. I do enjoy teaching, but I was teaching in the summer because I needed the money.
And now you teach because when you've built boundaries so you can gather more time freedom and still do what you love.
I do. And it really is a different, I used to be the chair of the department for many years. It was kind of an extra burden, but it had its benefits. I don't do this.
Now you can just say no. Now you can just say no.
I leave this to the young people. They treat me like an older person, which I am.
So I want to go into the different aspects of well-being, but I wrote down a note on the U curve when I was reading, when you brought it up in your book. And it sounds like, there's a mismatch. We always need to have tension to improve. That's happy people have projects is usually how I phrase it. But just like exercise, they moderate a little bit. And well, anyway, I wrote down it sounds like the key to flattening the U curve. Is accepting who you are. Yeah. And it's not flattening it. It's actually moving it up. Yeah. Oh, yeah. To an up. Okay. Yeah. Is it just accepting who you are and not worrying so much about stuff? That is right. Really knowing that financially you're fine. And now it is a matter of, they call it giving back. But, at Santa Clara University, we talk about helping students to grow into people for others, people who of course take care of themselves and family, but also of community, also of others. And so, my wife, for example, works a lot as a volunteer for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and she has done a lot of good for so many people and families who are living with mental illness. She gets paid nothing, of course. Not only that, we contribute good amounts of money to that organization. So we help other people. And in the process, we enhance our own life well-being, knowing that we are doing good for others. So we defined financial capital as one of the components of well-being. What are the others? So you can think about social capital, and social capital is about your circle of family and friends, close and farther away. And so you can see that among people
of, say, the working class, they might have a narrower set of friends, but closer together. Among people who have higher education and higher income, they have perhaps fewer close friends, but they have what are called weak ties. That is, people somebody who went to college with you, and if you are in need of a job, you know that Joe is now the CEO of a company, and so you can call him. You have not spoken in years, but he'll recognize who you are, and likely if there is an opening at his place, or he knows of something else, or through LinkedIn, people have those weak ties. You can find a job, or you can get advice about how to get your kids into the college of their choice, and so on. So social capital really matters. And social capital, beyond that circle of friends, it also is about trust. That is, are you saying that generally you can trust people, or are you always have to make sure, that you don't hand over the money before you get the good, because you're afraid that you're going to be cheated?
It's like going to lunch with somebody who never pays their share. Oh, I forgot my wallet.
I think that it is really the sense of people on the whole are good. Yes, sometimes you get cheated, but as they say, you cheat me once, you cheat me twice, I figure it out. But generally, you go by trust people. So that's a social capital.
So on social capital, I've observed in all the journeys that I've walked with people is that this can be an issue as you retire, because you shed a lot of that built-in social capital, and if you hadn't created it. And also, I think as you're getting older, you have to be even more intentional about renewing it, because you have people moving and passing away, etc. So what is your thought on social capital and the importance as you get older?
I think that you're absolutely right. Yeah, when we leave employment, we leave a lot of our social capital behind. These are people you work with, you gossip with, you invite them over for dinner, and so on. These tend to fade away. And it is important to create situations where you can create new friendships, that you didn't go to kindergarten together, but you can still reach out. So there are a lot of volunteer activities, for example, where there are people just like you, as old as you are, and you can go together for coffee and tell the story of your lives, and you get to be really close to them by disclosing some things about your life that are kind of private, and they do the same. And so you move from being just kind of colleagues or casual friends into being close friends. And people are generally willing, not all, but people are willing to engage. So there are many, take a course and speak with your classmates before and after class. Join Toastmasters, where you get to speak with others, give feedback, and along the way, you kind of create friendships. And so it is really important. And I know that it's difficult, because I can see Nava, my wife. She can strike conversations with people in the supermarket. She's going to see somebody put in their cart some vegetable she does not know, and she's going to ask them, how do you prepare this? Do you cook it? Do you eat it raw? I never do that. I just collect my groceries and go to the checkout.
Yeah, so we all have different capabilities and natural tendencies that we need to manage. Yeah.
But it is a skill. It is a skill. So I'm shy by nature, but I've learned, of course, to speak to my students. I've learned to speak in forums of hundreds of financial advisors and so on. And
in some ways,
them.
that's more comfortable sometimes than one-on-one.
It is, but you have to really learn both kinds. Just yesterday, I had a visitor at my home. Somebody, I was not his teacher, but he graduated from my university a year ago, and now he is a kind of a beginning financial advisor. And so we had a chat. He told me about his life. I told him about mine. He's going to read my book, and so on. So in this way, I kind of create friendship that can be deeper or not, depending on the circumstances. But I surely am expanding my social capital, and I learned a lot in the process.
Outside of the curiosity on your research, is that why you teach?
I suppose so. I really like to explore ideas, and I like to help people. That is in teaching. Generally, in teaching in medicine, where you work with people, this is why I describe good financial advisors as well-being advisors. Because just as in medicine, you want to have a physician who is on the frontier of knowledge of medicine, but also has good bedside manner, that is who can read between the line, who can guide you to disclose things that are kind of embarrassing, The same thing applies to good financial advisors who don't just talk about what the president is doing, tariffs, the Fed, but say, tell me something about your family. Is everything going okay? Are your kids okay?
It's very helpful to discover the thing behind the thing when they express something.
Yeah, and it's important to identify and disclose the points of pain, and everyone has those points of pain. And if you disclose yours, I, for example, am very open and quick to tell people about the fact that our older daughter lives with mental illness. And when I do that, kind of make myself vulnerable, but people's response is not, gee, too bad for you. Things are perfect for me. They will tell you something about their life. It might not be a disabled child. It might be a divorce. It might be a serious illness. There might be all kinds of things. But you can see that this really is the way you move from being colleagues and acquaintances to being friends. Friends know some things about you that are not public. It is not where you live. It is not what is your profession, and so on. It is something that is more intimate. And you need that kind of intimacy to create true friendship.
I want to call out that vulnerability part, but there's something you said a little bit earlier that I want to make sure I call out that you said, and that is people want it. They're waiting. Most of us are waiting for someone to hold out the hand of conversation or vulnerability. You have people that aren't, which is fine, but the vast majority of people crave that.
Yes. And so this ability to speak with other people. There was a time when, people would say, I was sitting next to somebody on the airplane and we talked about this. Well, this does not seem to happen anymore. Right now, people have stuff in their ears and they barely look at each other. So starting a conversation is really important. And so when I teach my students, I teach them about finance, of course, all the numbers and all of that, but I also teach them about life, and I ask them about risks. So you have financial risk, you have career risk, you have social risk, and so many of them will say, like me, I'm shy by nature, but I've learned that if it is kind of a social gathering, I can go to somebody and say, hi, my name is Meir, and I live here, and I'm a professor. Tell me a bit about yourself. And so you begin perhaps with the formalities of what kind of work do you do and so on. But then you go to other things, are you married or not? Do you have kids or not? All kinds of other things. And sort of breaking this ice is important. And some of my students say, I've learned to do it. And some say, it really is hard for me and I'm not very good at it. I know I should do that, but it really is difficult.
So what I heard is an old dog is learning new tricks.
You have to learn new tricks. Yeah, you cannot really say, I am an introvert by nature, so I'm going to stand by the wall and speak only if spoken to. You really have to kind of go out of your way. And as a woman said, I'm a loan officer in a bank. I may be shy or not. It doesn't matter. If I don't speak with people, I'm not going to be successful at my job.
My daughter has been learning
the
this.
Jobs that are really rewarding and the jobs that pay well are ones that require this ability to communicate with others, the ability to reach out.
So social capital is critical. I'm just finishing Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone, which talks about the research around how isolated we're becoming. The next one is not one that I've heard, and so I want to understand it better, is cultural capital. What is that, and how is that different from social?
Well, cultural capital is really knowing the common knowledge of a society. That is knowing, for example, when you go to a dinner party, what do you wear? Or if I'm going to give a talk, I'm asking, is it going to be formal? That is, I should have a tie on. Is it going to be one that is less formal? Maybe a jacket, but an open collar. What color of suit do I have to wear? Is it okay to wear a brown one or not? So I really encountered it. I'm as my accent reveals, I grew up in Israel, and so I was familiar with Israeli culture. American culture is different. They say that Israelis have two modes of conversations: speaking or waiting to speak. So I was speaking with a colleague of mine early on who is originally from Canada. So they are even more reserved than typical Americans. Sometimes he would pause speaking. Well, to me, as an Israeli, if he's pausing, he's done. My turn to speak. No, I've learned that if he pauses, it is because he's still gathering his thoughts. And so I've learned to wait until I get a clear signal that he is done saying what he wanted to say.
So what I heard is that you have social capital, that human connection. Cultural capital is understand. Well, I imagine you want to find your particular cultural, where you belong. So you think of a child in high school is trying to figure out where they belong.
Well, it's not so much. It really is to find out the cultural norms. What is considered okay? When somebody says, "How do you do?" they don't expect you to tell them about your whatever your illnesses. It is simply a hello. When somebody says, we should have lunch someday, this is not when you take out your calendar and say, how about next Tuesday? It is simply saying, hey, it was nice to speak with you. It would be nice to meet again. But don't rush. And so just to know
why is this
the meaning of words.
Why is this so important in well-being?
Well, it is important because when you break those norms, you really antagonize people. That you make them feel awkward, and that lessens the chance that you're going to be able to form relations with them. You have to know the language. You have to know the idioms. When I came, my English was such that I thought that queer is simply a synonym for strange. So I told my classmates, if you hear me mangle a sentence or mispronounce the word or use it incorrectly, you get the point. You probably meant strange rather than gay, but correct me, tell me, disclose to me that cultural capital.
Great example of a mismatch that you have to understand. Okay, I get it now. I think about our club, and we have some norms that have been beautiful to see, where we never talk politics. We're always solution oriented, and everybody knows to act that way. And I've rarely, if ever, had to ping somebody about not or violating those, because I guess they're naturally embedded. We know how we act.
Yeah. And if you're going to break a norm, be aware that you're going to be breaking a norm, that you can expect if you begin to say something about the president in a setting where this is not part of the norm, you should expect that somebody is going to say, well, thank you, Mayor, but I think that this is not the setting to speak about politics or religion or whatever. There's my aunt, my late aunt, used to say that when she meets her old girlfriends, they have a norm that says one grandchild and one malady. don't go on telling me.
I like those rules.
About each of the 7 ones and
two slides about your trip.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So you have to know that, and to be able to really adapt to different cultures. If you are in different cultures, so I got to speak about that a culture to a group of financial advisors in Canada, and they really found it fascinating because many times we behave in our norms. And we think that they are universal. We are not even aware. It's kind of like a fish that swims in water and is flabbergasted when it is asked, what is water?
Yes.
It just comes naturally. And you think that everybody knows that. And of course, they don't. So you have to be aware of it.
So as primarily where we focus our attention on this show and in the club are people that are transitioning from full-time work. Does developing these other 4 components of social, cultural, and personal capital, does it get harder as you age? Or should it?
It is a bit hard. That is having a classmate say, correct your pronunciation is kind of saying, gee, he's saying, I made a mistake and he's going to correct my mistake, but I made a mistake and it feels kind of awkward. So you have to open yourself. This is why I told my classmates, don't spare my feelings by telling me that this is mangled syntax that I'm using, because I am eager to learn more than I am eager not to be embarrassed. And so that really means both on the social side and the cultural side that you have to be open. I don't follow sports. I have no interest in baseball and football and so on. But I've learned to kind of react, at least in a socially acceptable way, when people tell me about a football player whose name is not known to me at all, and that person thinks that person must be known to me, as well as whatever my senator or something like that. So I've learned the polite way of saying that.
As you get older, and I'm not a scientist, so I don't know any data on this, but it seems that views get more cemented in our psyche in terms of our political views, our views on the economy. We become less curious or willing to be wrong in order to learn, because that's essentially what we need to have as as a foundation in order to do what you do. Hey, I'm not going to be embarrassed. I need to know if I'm making a mistake. I'm interested in something I don't understand. If we we don't go to politics very often. I'm not going to go to politics, but rather than say I'm right or you're wrong, I wonder what I need to explore that more rather than share my opinion. Is that the prerequisite for maintaining our social and cultural capital?
Yes, it is. And people vary along those lines. That there are people who by nature are curious and willing to learn, and some people who are really set in their way. But think about marriage. You have different tastes, different views, and you've learned to kind of dance. You learn to adapt and expect your mate to adapt as well. The same applies to any social relationships, and so you just cannot expect somebody to react when you say something about the subject that is sensitive, to just assume that person shares your view, and if not, that person must be ignorant or stupid. You can just say, let me listen, and it might be something where you have to say, this really is. I see that we have differences in views, but it is something that is too sensitive for me to actually discuss. It is, yes, we get to be old dogs, but we should be able to learn new tricks.
Now, the last component, and I said we were going to talk for like 20 minutes. It's been 44. There's so much to explore here because this is so important to well-being, which is how you create a great life. The last one is personal capital. So can you, want to be respectful of your time, briefly describe what you mean by personal capital?
Well, so think about being tall or short. Okay, I'm on the short side. I always say if when I'm bored again, I would like to be 6 foot tall. It has advantages with the girls. It has advantages at work. People who are taller are more likely to get promoted. So that it helps to be handsome. I wish I were. Some people are lucky enough to be born handsome. Some people are not. Gender, or sexual orientation, race, that all of these are part of personal capital. Nationality, that is.
Well, all of those you can't control. Those are set, right? Is that the only aspect of personal capital?
Yes, but some of them, personality, for example. So we talked about extrovert and introvert. These are things that you can change. You can change conscientiousness. If you know that you are one who acts on impulse, it is something where you learn, count till 10 before you open your mouth when you are angry. Openness, you can kind of get yourself to know if you are not one that is open to other views, that it is something that you have to work on. Be polite, at least, as you listen.
What this reminds me of is Sonia, I always pronounce her name wrong, Libermirsky, The How of Happiness, which talks about we have hardwired things that we can't change, right, but then we have to identify the things that we can improve the skill of.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Meir, this has been fantastic. I think this is a critical component that is often overlooked in retirement planning. We talk about this a lot. We didn't even get into eudaimonia and what's the name of the ladder? The ladder, which is sort of the measurement. We can do that maybe another time. Thank you so much for your time. A Wealth of Wellbeing, a holistic approach to behavioral finance. This is critical for what we call rocking retirement. And I appreciate you sharing all the research and wisdom you have.
Thank you so much, Roger. It is wonderful to speak with you, and I hope that listeners would enjoy our conversation.
Now it's time to answer some of your questions. If you have a question for the show, you can go to askroger.me and you can type in your question, leave an audio question, and we'll do our best to help you on the show. We didn't answer questions last week. We'll try to make sure we do this every week. Our first question comes from Brian, who is retiring early. Congratulations, Brian. But he's wondering how he's going to create his paycheck. He says, for someone 6+ years away from 59 and a half, is there a default strategy delineating withdrawal order from his assets? He says, 401k, IRA, Roth, non-retirement, etc. He wants to know what's the optimized order for taxes and fees. That's his first question. His second question is where he should direct savings before he retires. Should he add more to his Roth 401k or save in after-tax assets, given that his after-tax assets might not be enough to fund the gap before he's 59 and a half? So these are good questions. All right, Brian, let's take these in order. Number one is there is no optimized strategy. I'm going to assume you're 52 for this discussion, Brian. So we got a 40-year timeline, let's assume. A lot can happen. This is very complex in terms of inflation and returns in your life, et cetera. So you just got to think through this in an organized way to get to a good decision for you. I think that's the important thing. So how do you approach this? Well, I think the default order is the best place to start, which is hardwired into most software programs, which is you first go to your after-tax assets, your savings and investments that you've already paid taxes on. Then you go to your pre-tax assets. And you'll have some quirks because you're under 59 and a half that we'll talk about. And then you go to your Roth assets. I think that is a good default to start with. Now, you said your after-tax assets might not be enough to fill the gap. And that's an important thing because you're under 59 and a half, so you're constricted or restricted on how you access the other funds. So we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that. So I would say on the savings end of it, I would look seriously at contributing more to your after-tax assets, thinking that you're building up your reserves to make your paycheck when you ultimately retire. Because otherwise you might have to take it out of an IRA or a Roth account. So I would likely lean towards contributing to your after-tax assets rather than to a Roth 401k, simply because it sounds like you have some immediate needs for these monies coming up. So the more you can build up there, the better, because that will help you in managing where you pull assets later on. So that's my initial thought on where you should be saving. Now, you said that you're part of the RRC, which is awesome. And that means you have access to the Money Guide Elite software to build out your feasible plan. And you also have access to the Excel planner spreadsheet where you can map this out in a little bit more detail. So I would first build out your 5, and maybe you even make it all the way up to 59 and a half, but map out the next 5 years of your income and expected spending. That's important. So do that, tab in the spreadsheet first. And for those of you that aren't in the club, you can just build a spreadsheet and show your first 5 years of cash flow. Then go to the next tab and identify all the different accounts that you have and the money that you need to fund that isn't covered by income, and map out exactly where you're going to get the money over that time period, in this case, 5 years. Start with your after-tax assets, Brian. Map out taking money from your after-tax assets and see how long those after-tax assets would last. And you can include in the additional savings that you're going to do between now and when you say you're going to retire. It may drain all of those assets, or you may not have enough. And that can be problematic in the future self for Brian, because as soon as you run out of all your after-tax assets, now you're just stuck with pay taxes by an IRA distribution or take from your Roth. So I think it's important to leave some buffer in your after-tax assets. So then the next question is, do you take from your Roth 401k, which is what you asked? Well, one, you got to be careful if you're going to do a withdrawal from your Roth 401k. One is you have to have the rule of 55, and it sounds like you're going to be under 55 when you do this. But if you take a withdrawal from a Roth 401k, they're not like Roth IRAs. If you take a withdrawal from a Roth IRA, you get your contributions first. If it's from a Roth 401k, it's pro rata. It's a portion of your contributions and the earnings. So you could have some penalty there and some taxes because of your age. So be careful about that and research those rules. If you don't have IRAs established yet, Brian, because you only mentioned a Roth 401k, get a Roth IRA established and fund it, even if you do have to do some kind of Roth conversion with $1 or $2 just to get that clock started. Because ultimately, you're going to have more flexibility in a Roth IRA than a Roth 401k. Okay, now where are you going to fill the gap? How can you access your pre-tax assets in your 401k or in your pre-tax IRA? Because there may be an opportunity there if you're willing to walk this journey. And in your question, you mentioned a couple strategies. One strategy to get money out of a 401k prior to 59 and a half without paying penalties, because there's a 10% penalty if you take an early withdrawal before 59 and a half, is the rule of 55 within a 401k. So if you separate service when you're 55 or older, you have the potential to take distributions from your 401k without paying a 10% penalty. Now, if you retire prior to 55, that may not be an option. If you are retiring after 55, you want to make sure you check your 401k plan, because the 401k plan doesn't need to offer that feature, number one. So you got to know whether it offers that feature. And then number two, you need to understand the restrictions on how you take your distributions, because they're all different. So if you're thinking about a rule of 55 strategy prior to 59 and a half, one, you got to make sure that your employer plan offers it. And two, you need to understand the restrictions on whether you can just do this whenever you want and in the amount that you want, because some may have restrictions on that. But it sounds like you're retiring prior to 55, Brian. And so another strategy to access pre-tax assets in an IRA or a 401k is something called substantially equal periodic payments, also referred to as the 72T strategy, which is the IRS code that it comes from. And I created a basics explainer video on this that we're going to share in the Noodle email. So for those of you that get our weekly email, I'll have a video that walks through this visually and give you the basics. And if you're not, you can sign up for the noodle.me, and that way you can get that weekly email. But let's just talk through your situation here for a second, Brian, because I have a calculator that we use when calculating a substantially equal payment. So the way that a 72T works is you can choose an account. So let's say you have 3 IRA accounts. Each account is considered separate when it comes to these substantially equal periodic payments. So let's say you have a $1 million account IRA, you have a $500,000 IRA, and then you have a $500,000 401k, all pre-tax. Let's do it that way. You can choose which account you apply the 72T plan for. And what it does is the IRS says you can calculate based on your life expectancy substantially equal payments that you can take from that account. And if you follow the rules, then you won't pay the 10% early withdrawal penalty. So I went to a calculator, Brian, and I said, let's assume that you wanted to use your $1 million IRA to calculate these substantially equal payments. So there are 3 different methods for calculating the payments. For simplification purposes, we're just going to focus on the simplest one, which is single life expectancy. So on that $1 million IRA, we have to apply what's called the reasonable interest rate, which is 120% of a Fed rate. And then we take your age, and I'm assuming you're 52, and says, what is the maximum payment you could take from the IRA each year under this provision and not pay a early withdrawal penalty? And the calculator that I used as this example would be $69,970. Well, that's not bad. So if you retire at age 52 and you apply this to $1 million IRA, you should be able to take out roughly $70,000 a year without paying an early withdrawal penalty. That just sounds like a deal. Why would they do that? Well, they want to, provide you the opportunity to do what you're doing, to retire early, but there are going to be some catches with this, Brian. And those catches are that you have to follow the plan specifically. If you sign up for this and you do your $70,000 as an example, you have to do it for at least 5 years or until you're 59 and a half, whichever is later. So in this example, you're 52, so you would have to do this every single year until the year that you reach 59 and a half. So you'd be signing up for a 7-8 year journey of making sure you took out the exact same amount each year, $69,970. If you failed to do that, you could subject all of your withdrawals up to that date to the 10% early withdrawal penalty. So it's 5 years or when you reach 59 and a half, whichever is longer. So let's use another example, Brian. Let's assume that you are 58 and you decide to do this. The number would be higher because it's based off of your life expectancy. It would be about just over 74,000. But when you're 78 and you do this, you're only, a year and a half away from 59 and a half. So in this case, you would have to do it up until age 62 because it's whichever is longer, the 5 years or until you reach 59 and a half. So this is a strategy, Brian, that may allow you to draw money from an IRA or a 401k without early withdrawal penalty. Now it's going to be taxable income and this could impact ACA subsidies, etc. But if you have zero income and you're not worried about ACA subsidies, $74,000 is within the 12% tax bracket. If you're married, you can see how this strategy can work. But it's got some rules that you got to follow. Another quirk in doing this, let's assume you did this $1 million IRA, Brian. You don't want to add money to the account or take money out of the account because it's locked. That might affect the calculation and cause you to have an unintended consequence in terms of early withdrawal penalty. So if you do this, you want to segregate one IRA that is doing this strategy and think of it like a lockbox. You're not taking any more out and you're not putting any more in that specific account. Now, your other accounts, you can do whatever you want with, withdrawal-wise, moving around-wise, but you got to think of this as a lockbox until the strategy is complete to help you avoid unforced errors. So we'll have an explainer video on the basics of this so you can see some visuals of this and the calculator that we use. And then we'll also have links to resources. But this would be the order that I would approach this, Brian. Let's get to at least one more question. The show's running a little long. We had Dr. Statman on here. Let's go to a different Brian. Brian says, I love the podcast. I've been listening for a few years. My Fidelity advisor is recommending I put $100,000 of my IRA into a SPDA, single premium deferred annuity, for 3 years to get a slightly better rate. They're offering 5% than what I can get in a treasury, which is 4.3%, or even less than a CD. I'm generally not a fan of annuities, Brian says. Our one source made it sound like when the 3 years is up, I would be forced to take the principal and earnings out of my IRA. This would be a bad tax planning, assuming that is true. These are not FDIC insured. What are the pros and cons of such an investment? Are these things new? I assume it is a Twinkie. I love you're using the term as you describe on your podcast. Should I invest in this? So we just recently did a episode where we talked about fixed annuities or multi-year guaranteed annuities. That sounds like what this is, Brian. So you can talk with your Fidelity advisor around that. I would say these are the least Twinkie-ish of an annuity. Very much going to act like a CD or a treasury in that you get a guaranteed payment or interest for a specific period of time. They have some quirks around the paperwork and the ability to get out of it before the term is done. That can be pretty onerous from a back-end sales charge. But if you're planning on holding it to maturity, I have used these in my practice. Assuming we're talking about a fixed annuity or multi-year guaranteed annuity, it sounds like the same thing. So let's assume that it is the same thing, Brian. So then the question is, I can get 5% in this 3-year fixed annuity, or I can get 4.3% in a treasury. So 5% on $100,000 over 3 years is end value of about $115,762. If you do the treasury, 4.3%, it's $113,462. So about a $2,300 difference or more you're going to get in the annuity than you would in the treasury. So what we're talking here is about a difference of $2,300. Is it worth the effort? So what are you giving up to get that extra $2,300? Number one, you're giving up FDIC insurance. I don't think that's a huge issue as long as you're not using a sketchy insurance company. They have credit ratings. Number two, you're adding a little bit more complexity because a fixed annuity doesn't show on your statement exactly like a treasury does. Number three, you're giving up optionality. A treasury, if you buy it for 3 years, you can sell that in the market if you needed your money early. And assuming flat interest rates, basically get most of your money back or all of it because it's one of the most liquid markets in the world. Whereas if you buy a fixed annuity and you try to get out of it prior to the 3 years, you're likely going to have a high back-end sales charge. This is something you would want to ask the Fidelity advisor. So you may give up some optionality in terms of getting money out. And it's just going to be a little bit more complex in how it shows. Is it worth the $2,300 extra that you're going to be getting? Get to your last question there, Brian. If you're purchasing something like this within an IRA, at the end of the 3 years, if you take your money back, it should come back into the IRA and be a non-taxable event. So I wouldn't worry about that unless there's some quirk that I'm not familiar with. So hopefully that helps you. We'll get to more of you guys' questions next week. But for now, let's get to our smart sprint.
On your marks, get set.
Now it's time to set a smart sprint we can take in the next 7 days to not just rock retirement, but rock life. All right, I'm going to challenge you for the next 7 days. Before you get out of bed, smile. Give yourself a big smile and say, this is going to be a great day. I'm going to have challenges, but it's going to be a great day. And see how it goes. Now it's time for the next installment of my grandfather's journal. We are getting close to the end because he had about 50 missions, 51 if I recall. Today we are on mission 45, so just a few left. September 8th, ship number 339, sortie 30th. Broad Yugoslavia and marshalling yards was the target today. Darn good bombing today. We set a record of going over the target 3 times before dropping our bombs. Gave the flak installations a chance to really track us and give us some exciting moments. I guess he's getting used to it. I don't know how you do that, but carried 12 500-pound bombs, mission 6 hours, 10 minutes, altitude 23,500 feet.